Hey everybody, Jake here, and today we're going to take a look at the Spyderco Centofante 3. This is a very interesting, somewhat littleish knife from Spyderco. This isn't a very popular knife in their lineup, and I really don't get why. I really like this, and I'll go over, what I like about it, what I'm neutral towards and what I dislike, but all in all, it is a pretty good knife. We'll go ahead and do some size comparisons here. So first up, we'll go ahead and compare it to something that's pretty close to its size. This is the ZT 0450 CF. So you can see it's a little bit shorter, a little bit more narrow. The ZT does have a longer blade, but it's not by, not by a ton. But the handle on the Centofante 3 seems to be a lot longer when they're opened up, simply because it curves a lot more. In overall length, it's not too terribly much longer, but there is probably half an inch there. Slightly smaller offering from Spyderco, the Dragonfly 2. This is a very nice little knife, and it is quite a bit smaller than the Centofante 3. However, one thing I do want to point out is that it is not much thicker than the Dragonfly. You can see they come into a very similar thickness here. This one's just a very slightly thicker, and in reference to the ZT, it is. Well, let's take the clip screws into consideration maybe, and see here. So yeah, it's a tiny bit thicker, but it's not by much at all. So this is a pretty thin knife. I'm going to compare it to the CRKT folding Razel. This also has a kind of strange blade to handle ratio, so it's in a similar ballpark in size. They're very close lengthwise, but in almost every other dimension, the Centofante 3 is smaller. It's a little bit wider, but it's still going to fit in your pocket much more easily, especially in the thickness department. It's much smaller. Last comparison here is going to be the Benchmade Proper, which is a somewhat more popular knife at the moment. So you can see the Proper is much smaller. It is very thin, probably at the same thickness as the Dragonfly, and a slightly shorter blade, significantly shorter handle. Final size comparison. Here it is against a partially used Hardee's gift card with about $1.36 left on there. So you can see it's a lot more narrow than the Hardee's gift card, a little bit longer, especially opened up. It's going to be quite a bit of size difference here, and it is significantly thicker. So this is going to take up a little bit more space in your pocket on two of the three dimensions. Alright, on to what I like about it. So first thing is actually going to be the blade stock. So I'll kind of show you here. If it's difficult to tell, this is extremely thin. This is very thin. For reference here, I'll go ahead and pull out the CTO 450. You can see it's about half the size as far as stock thickness goes. And it is actually thinner than the Dragonfly. This blade stock is very thin. So this knife is not going to be good if you need something super tough and heavy duty, but if you need just a cutting tool, it excels at that. It slices extremely well. It does have just a little bit of a hollow grind going on, so it was very thin behind the edge. It does have a sharpening choil, which is very nice, and it cuts very well. It also has a nice swedge to come here and meet the tip. So this is good for piercing as well, to punch into a bag or whatever you need to do. With me, it's usually dog food. Just slice in there. But very thin blade stock. Very good at slicing. The aesthetic of this knife is also very nice, in my opinion. I love the design. The kind of hollows here on the handle, the little palladium silver spider inlaid there. So this side is very interesting. This side's significantly more boring, but generally this is the show side of the knife. So you can see a little hint of the back lock there, but it's kind of contoured. There's a lot of curvature going on here, and it's a very flowing design. Even the blade shape is very interesting. This little bit of jimping here gives you a very, very good grip on it. Nice place to rest your thumb. And it fits in my hand very, very well. I really like this knife ergonomically. It's probably my favorite knife that I have as far as, you know, feel in the hand goes. Some people won't like the aesthetic, others will. This is actually, I found out about this knife from a show called Durarara. It's also but it's a Japanese anime, basically. But there's a character in there who uses this knife, and I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. That's kind of what, in a way, got me into looking at knives, at least not buying them yet, but, you know, getting there. So this was the first knife that I really, really wanted, and it's pretty good. There are a few things that I don't love about it. We'll get into that into a bit. The action on this thing's pretty good. So it is a lock back, so once you get it to about here, it's going to snap closed. However, you can flick it very easily. Well, except for that one time when I just did it there. Normally, though, it flicks open like that. A little bit better. So you don't have to give it any wrist or anything like that. You can very easily open it slowly if you want to do that. It is, I believe, on bronze washers. Although it's difficult to see. The action's very, very good. Put a little bit of 10 weight nano oil just right there near the back lock, and it flicks very well. I haven't had any issues with this knife. It's not very easy to middle finger flick, but we'll get into that in a bit. But as far as just thumb opening, works like a charm. The ergos, like I said, they're just fantastic on here. Fits very well in my hand. I have just enough to grab onto. I can kind of pull back just a little bit, and it still kind of, you know, has enough there. But generally, I hold it somewhere around here, and that thumb ramp just really, really does it for me. Love this thing. The weight and the size of the knife are also very good. Like I said, in comparison to a bunch of my other knives, it's fairly small. It's a little over a 3-inch blade, just very slightly, which is, you know, to some people that's going to be a little annoying due to size restrictions. For me, I think the blade should actually be a little bit longer for the handle. So it's kind of a rough ratio. You can see the blade comes to about there. There's still about 1/4 of an inch. I wish they'd pushed it out just a little bit more, maybe to 3.25, but it's okay. I haven't needed more blade. It just looks a little strange to me aesthetically when you're comparing the blade length to the handle length, you know. But it's very thin. It carries very, very well. Love carrying this knife. This is probably the knife I carry the most just because of that. It's very slim in my pocket. I don't have to worry about it. And as you can see, I do carry around a decent bit. I try not to let it get too beat up, but that hasn't stopped it. So size and weight on this are fantastic. It weighs 0.05 ounces more than a ZTO 450. Now the ZT does have a smaller handle and a slightly longer blade, and it does have titanium on one side, but this knife is still extremely lightweight. Especially when you compare it to something like, you know, the CRKT folding Razel, that thing weighs a ton, or most of the other knives. So it comes in at a little over 2 ounces, about 2.5. So it's pretty good. Very light, and you're getting less than 1 ounce an inch as far as blade length goes. So that's very nice. The clip is really good. It's not deep carry. In this situation, I don't mind so much because this, like I said, this is kind of my beater knife, so I'd like to be able to grab it and pull it out, because when I'm carrying this, I tend to use it a lot. The clip does take a little damage because it's painted, but if that bothers you, you can always sand it down. It does have pretty good spring to it. It's very, very easy to get in and out of the pocket. And it also serves as a very easy way to grab the knife. If you don't want to grab it here, you can always grab it here, reach down your pocket with your thumb, and pull it out. So it's very, very nice. And it doesn't really affect the ergonomics at all because it's very well rounded and chamfered. It sits in the hand very, very well. I really like this clip on this knife. That being said, there are no aftermarket options as far as I could find, so you're kind of stuck with it. So if you don't like this clip, I would suggest either taking it off or kind of avoiding this knife because you won't really have any other options as far as the clip goes. On to the neutral. So first thing up is the price. So this is $72 or $73 depending on where you get it, which is after the Spyderco price increase. It used to sit around $60 or so, which to me was a much more compelling price for this knife. $70 isn't bad for what you're getting here. I think it's been worth every penny to me, but I also paid that $60 price. I didn't pay the, increased price, which is a little rough. However, one thing that I don't see mentioned about this knife very much is it's a little bit longer than the Delica, which is extremely popular. Shorter than the Endura. It's right in between them. In my opinion, it uses a much better looking FRN handle. The aesthetics are better. Same backlock. Very, very good ergos. And it costs less. It's a couple dollars less than the Delica. The only thing that I can see that is lesser on this knife is that it's pinned construction, which we will come back to. But in my opinion, I would prefer this over the Delica, which is kind of why I bought it. I tried out the Delica, wasn't a huge fan. Handled it in the store for, maybe 10-15 minutes, and it really reinforced my choice to go with this knife. However, the price is getting a little high, but that's on all Spydercos. The materials are a little rough as well, in accordance with the price. 5 or 6 years ago, this would have been fine. FRN handles, stainless steel backlock, VG10 blade. But nowadays, you have Chinese companies doing the same price in G10 and D2, and it's not competitive. Spyderco's warranty is a little rough. You can't actually disassemble this knife, so it doesn't super matter in that, in that aspect, but it's not holding up to the competition, and I think they're going to be feeling that very soon. That's just my opinion. Next up, this is a backlock, which I don't like. So I've seen some people be able to flick it out that way. I can't really, and I really can't flick it closed that way either. Not a big fan of backlocks. Luckily, this one you can open and close one-handed, so it's not a big deal to me, but I would prefer a compression lock. But it's not too difficult to work. Speaking of difficulty, this is very difficult to middle finger flick. It's damn near impossible as far as I'm concerned. Maybe if I do it like this and give it a little wrist, we'll see. Okay, so yeah, you can do it that way. But as far as flicking it kind of like I'm able to with introvert, it doesn't happen. I'll show you here. That's about as far as I can get. It just doesn't go all the way. So no middle finger flicking option on this particular Spyderco knife. And last but most certainly not least, on to what I dislike about the knife. So there was quite a bit in the like, and there was a decent bit in neutral. There's only a couple of things here. Like I said, I really, really enjoy this knife, and I really think it should get more recognition than it does. However, there are a few things that I don't like. And to be honest, I really don't think they'll bother too many people. Probably just me, to be honest. So fit and finish. If you watch my videos, you know I find as many fit and finish issues as I can, because when I buy something, I expect it to feel very good. Within a certain range. $60, I wasn't expecting much. However, this is ridiculous, to be honest. Okay, we'll just start on top here. So this cool little palladium spider is not flush. It is rough, and I can feel it every time I pass my hand over it. You can see the plastic injection seams here. Some of these are worse than others. You can see that one there. Same thing here. The centering is not perfect. It's just, there's a lot of gaps and seams. There's a really bad one right up here near the top of the backlock. And it's just not great. Some more kind of rough, non-chamfered areas in here on the inside. It's not super well finished. It's decently made, but not well finished, which is very important. Not so much in a $60 knife, but I don't know, I kind of expected a little bit more on this. Last thing, and this probably won't bother a lot of people, is that it's pinned. So there's no disassembly that you can do for this knife. The only screws that you can remove at all are the clip screws. Speaking of, the top screw up here, see if I can get it to focus for you. When I was changing the clip, because it comes tipped down and I'm not insane, when I was changing the clip, the top one starts dripping out. That's not okay, but it happened. So out of 3 screws on the knife, one of them stripped. That's just a little bit much. And due to the pin construction, it's not, you know, difficult to clean out or maintain a back lock. You really don't disassemble them in most cases anyway. They're just a pain. But you can just kind of wash that out and you know, put some oil right in here and you're fine. But it's just a little frustrating. So those are the only two things that really bothered me about this knife. On to the conclusion. So first thing that I've got to say about this knife is, if you're interested in the style, you don't mind the pin construction, or it's not a deal breaker for you, you know, and you're looking for a knife around this size range, get it. In my opinion, it's a lot better than the Delica. It's smaller than the Enduro, which is a little too big for me. I don't need a 4-inch blade, but you know, to each their own. But the ergonomics on here are great. The price is good. It's cheaper than both the Delica and the Enduro. And the blade stock's just really thin. If you need something really slicey, this is just great for it. Has good swedge for piercing, great ergonomics. It's a really, really nice knife. So in my opinion, if you're considering it, go ahead and get it. I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. That being said, there's a few things that do bother me about this knife that a very similar model have fixed. I mentioned I'm not a big fan of the back lock. I mentioned I don't like the pin construction. I mentioned the steel is okay. There's a slightly different version of this knife called the Vesuvius, the Spyderco Vesuvius. They have one very similar to this, and then they have one with a gorgeous teal inlay on it, or turquoise, whatever it is. That knife is discontinued. It had screws instead of being pinned, and it had a compression lock. It also had, I believe you could get aftermarket clips for it. So, because it used Spyderco's standard little 3-screw clip. So that's a little frustrating that they discontinued that in favor of this. Now you can find them. I found 3. I found one in a little worse condition than this, not too terrible, on eBay last week, and it just got a little high for what I could afford at the time. Got around $80 or so, and I was just not comfortable paying that at the moment, so I skipped out on it. There's also a user on Reddit who had one of these, a Vesuvius though, without the bug inlay, it was missing, and then one with that gorgeous bluish green inlay. Those were $100 for the one that was missing the bug, and like $200 for the one that had the regular inlay, or the special inlay. That's just ridiculous. Like, this is a good knife, don't get me wrong, but I don't think the steel's that much better on the Vesuvius. It may be about the same, but it is different. You know, if it were an S35 VN or CPM 154 M390, a better steel, even S30V, I wouldn't mind paying a little more for it. If we could get the Vesuvius again, or if they released it again with the screws, compression lock, and even the same steel, I would buy it again. But if it had an upgraded steel, I would easily pay $150 for this knife. It is amazing. I love the form. I love the design. I just wish there were a few things that they had kept instead of just getting this basic pinned and kind of poorly finished knife out the door. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Like I said, if you're looking for a knife kind of in between the Enduro and Delica, feel free to check this out. This is a really, really good knife in my opinion. If you can afford it, you know, support one of your local knife dealers. If you don't have any, you know, go get it online somewhere. If you don't have enough money, you can find these used for like 30 or 40 bucks. It's a pretty good deal. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out my other stuff if you like this, and feel free to subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.